Welcome to the second lesson in our Gender-Sensitive M&E Toolbox. In this online lecture, we will answer the following questions. Why are gender-sensitive M&E tools important for program design? What are the key elements of the front-end analysis? What are some gender-sensitive M&E tools for conducting a front-end analysis? And finally, how do we use gender-sensitive tools in program design? So let's start with the first question. Why are gender-sensitive M&E tools important for program design? Before designing any gender-relevant democracy assistance program, it is important to understand the status of women in a given context, identify the key stakeholders that influence women's political empowerment or disempowerment in that context, and analyze the core problem your program will address, including its root causes and negative effects, as they pertain to women's political empowerment. Remember that without a gender-sensitive front-end analysis, interventions not only run the risk of being ineffective, but they may inadvertently do harm or create conflict for women. So what are the key elements of the front-end analysis? NDI as an institute uses the logical framework approach for program design and has developed an online toolbox around it. The logical framework approach, as you may know, is an analytical process and a set of tools used to support objective-oriented project planning and management. It is a time-proven method for ensuring that your program is evaluable. The first three steps in the LFA comprise the front-end analysis. Let's quickly review these three steps before introducing the tools for making your front-end analysis gender-sensitive. The first three steps of the LFA, known as the front-end analysis, provide a foundation for the design of your program. The three steps in the front-end analysis are the context analysis, the stakeholder analysis, and the problem analysis. The front-end analysis helps program teams to assess the context where a prospective program will be implemented, identify key stakeholders and determine their potential influence on a project, and analyze the causes and consequences of a democracy and governance core problem. To learn more about these steps, visit our toolbox on Monitoring, Evaluation, and Learning portal page. Now that we have reviewed the first three steps in the LFA, what are some gender-sensitive tools that you can use in your front-end analysis? To illustrate these gender-sensitive M&E tools, we will continue using the Burkina Faso case study introduced in Lesson 1. In Lesson 1, we introduced Naila Kabir's empowerment framework and demonstrated how NDI has amended Kabir's framework to design, monitor, and evaluate a women's political empowerment program in Burkina Faso. To make Kabir's empowerment framework more relevant and applicable to NDI's work, we amended definitions for three key domains of change. Access to resources were amended to access to political and representative resources, such as party lists, elected office, leadership positions on committees, and/or on community forums. These kinds of political resources provide women with more access to decision-making power and influence. Political agency was defined as the actions taken by women leaders in promoting gender-sensitive policies, programs, and/or budgets that affect women's well-being. And lastly, achievement was defined as political achievement, the change women leaders achieve in legislations, policies, programs, and/or budgets as a consequence of accessing political resources and exercising political agency. These three domains of access, agency, and achievement are cumulative in strengthening women's political empowerment. As you'll see in these online lectures, the empowerment framework became key in the front-end analysis, the intervention design, and in the development of a monitoring and evaluation strategy. For gender-sensitive front-end analysis, the Monitoring, Evaluation, and Learning team has developed two tools: the Women's Empowerment Analysis Matrix and the Gender-Sensitive Problem Tree. The Women's Empowerment Analysis Matrix is a combination of both the context analysis and stakeholder analysis. Modified from Ronnie Parker's Gender Analysis Matrix, The Women's Empowerment Analysis Matrix integrates the three dimensions of empowerment: access, agency, and achievement to explicitly analyze women's political empowerment. To analyze the problems that women face in political processes, we have revised the problem tree by organizing the core problem, its root causes, and effects around the three dimensions of empowerment. So how do we apply these gender-sensitive tools in program design? Women's Empowerment Analysis Matrix is a participatory tool that helps you analyze women's political status in a given context. The tool helps you understand the challenges and opportunities that exist for women to use representative resources and agency to achieve change. It also helps you identify key stakeholders that impact the outcome. So how do we complete the matrix? As a group, brainstorm and list the stakeholders who are most likely to exert influence on women's political empowerment. Write each stakeholder in the first column of the matrix as shown here. These are some examples from Burkina Faso program. Remember the process of women's empowerment as defined by Naila Kabir and discuss how each stakeholder can affect women's access to representative resources, agency, and achievement. By asking yourselves, how are, for example, members of parliament affecting women's access to representative resources in political processes? How are members of parliament affecting women's agency in political processes? How are members of parliament affecting women's achievements in political processes? Once you have your responses, place them in the boxes underneath each dimension of empowerment. You will repeat the same steps for all of your stakeholders. This is an illustrative example from Burkina Faso program. To complete this matrix, we asked ourselves, how do MPs affect women's access to resources in political processes? And the answer was by hindering or helping their access to leadership positions on committees. How do MPs affect women's agency in political processes? The answer was by hindering or helping women's agency in incorporating gender into legislations. How do MPs affect women's achievements in political processes? The answer was again by hindering or helping women's achievements in drafting gender-sensitive legislations. Please take a few minutes to review this example. Problem analysis is at the heart of an intervention. It is key to identifying root causes of a core problem and its negative effects. The gender-sensitive tree will help you identify a core problem that, if addressed by the intervention, would become an achievement, and identify root causes that create barriers for women to access political resources and exercise political agency. How do we complete a gender-sensitive problem tree? In this example, we will complete a problem tree using the first core problem from the Burkina Faso case study. That says the legislation in Burkina Faso does not effectively address the differential needs and interests of women and men. Remember that if this problem is addressed, it will become an achievement for women. Now that we have our core problem, we're ready to brainstorm the causes and effects related to the core problem. The brainstorming process is very organic, so we shouldn't worry about the order in which we brainstorm. We can begin by brainstorming the effects first or the causes first. Or we might decide to brainstorm both causes and effects simultaneously. The important step is to ask ourselves, is this a cause or an effect? Here we have identified one cause, that women MPs do not occupy leadership positions within parliamentary committees. We've also identified one effect, that legislative committees are not prioritizing gender when analyzing and drafting new legislation. Another root cause of this problem is that women MPs lack skills in analyzing and drafting legislations that are gender sensitive. We've also identified another effect, that public goods are not equitably distributed between men and women. After you've identified the root causes, decide on which root cause corresponds to which dimension of the women's empowerment process, by asking yourselves, what is the root cause that impacts women's access to resources? In the case of Burkina Faso, women's lack of leadership positions within parliamentary committees is one of the causes that hinders women's access to representative resources. Then ask yourselves, what is the root cause that impacts women's agency? For example, in Burkina Faso, women's lack of skills in analyzing and drafting gender-sensitive legislation can hinder women's political agency. To complete the process, we use a marker to draw red lines between a cause and its related effects. For example, the cause is stating that women MPs do not occupy leadership positions within parliamentary committees leads to legislative committees not prioritizing gender when analyzing and drafting new legislation. Some causes may have multiple effects, and some effects may have more than one cause. This is an illustrative example from Burkina Faso. If you have more than one core problem, make sure that you repeat the same steps for each core problem. Before we conclude our lesson, let's review what we learned today. At the beginning of this lecture, we asked ourselves 4 questions. Our first question was, why are gender-sensitive M&E tools important for program design? And we learned that using gender-sensitive tools at program design helps us understand the status of women in a given context, identify the key stakeholders that influence women's political empowerment, and analyze the core problem your program will address, including its root causes and negative effects. Then we asked ourselves, what is front-end analysis? And we learned that front-end analysis helps program teams assess the context where a prospective program will be implemented, identify stakeholders and determine their potential influence over a project, and analyze the causes and consequences of a democracy and governance core problem. Our third question was, what gender-sensitive M&E tools can be used in front-end analysis? While there are many tools available for program design and front-end analysis, we learned about 2 tools that Monitoring, Evaluation, and Learning team has developed. The Women's Empowerment Analysis Matrix, which is a combination of context analysis and stakeholder analysis, and that helps you analyze the process of women's political empowerment and the impact that stakeholders have in determining the outcome. And the Gender-Sensitive Problem Tree, that helps you identify the core problem that women face in political processes and analyze its root causes and negative effects. Our final question was, how do we use gender-sensitive tools in program design? And we learned that these tools are participatory, so you should work as a group to brainstorm the stakeholders and identify the core problem that your program will address, including its root causes and negative effects. Moving forward, in our next lesson, we will learn how to use gender-sensitive tools to design a gender-sensitive intervention that includes objective analysis and development of an implementation plan.